Welcome everyone to the March Ordinary Council meeting. It being the allotted time, I'll declare this meeting open at 6 p.m. Kaya Marman, Kaya Yoga, Kaya Bridie, Yana Nook, Nalak Karij Widji Adal Nini, Nalak Karij Nija Buja Bal, Wajak Nunga Buja Lalak Nini, Kora, Nijie Borawan. On behalf of the town of Bassendean, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we meet, the Wajak people of the Noongar Nation. May their campfires burn forever. I would also like to remind people that our meetings are recorded and uploaded to the town's website and also live streamed. I will have to move a motion, councillors, to suspend the operation of clauses 6.9, 6.12, 6.17, 7.1 and 7.2 and modify the operation of clauses 6.1, 6.6, 6.7, 6.10 and 6.11 of the Town of Bassendean Meeting Procedures Local Law 2020 for the duration of this electronic meeting, and that these matters be determined at the discretion of the presiding member. Can I have a mover to move that motion? Councillor McLennan, a seconder. Councillor Wilding. Anyone against? I'll declare that carried. That's carried unanimously. Announcements by the presiding person. I just have one announcement tonight. The town-appointed contractor Phase 3 is at the halfway mark in providing a nature-based playground at Sandy Beach. It is anticipated that this major project will be completed in the second half of 2022, providing our community
Unknown participant is now joining.
Okay, I will just stop for a minute. I have a message that another participant has joined the meeting, and I'm not sure who that might be.
That would be Mr. Christos, ready for when his deputation will be coming.
Okay, so I will complete my announcement. It's anticipated this major project will be completed in the second half of 2022, providing our community with an incredibly diverse space catering to all ages. A new jetty, bike racks and drinking fountain have been installed recently, preceding the new toilets and playground in the coming year, plus additional native planting beds as part of the upcoming works program. We all enthusiastically look forward to the completion of this project. We'll now move on to attendances, apologies and applications for leave. I believe, Councillor McLennan, you have an application for leave.
Yes, correct. From April 18th to the 25th of April over the school holidays.
Thank you very much. Do I have any other applications for leave? Okay, can I have a mover? Councillor Wilding, seconded. Councillor McWilliam. Anyone against? I'll declare that carried unanimously. Declarations of interest. We have a few tonight. I'm just going to read these out, and councillors, if I get any of them wrong, please let me know. I have a proximity interest for item 12.3, which is the right-of-way strategy. At that point, when we come to that item, I will request the Deputy Mayor to step into the role as presiding person and preside over that item whilst I leave the meeting, and will return after that item has been discussed. Councillor McLennan has an impartiality interest in item 16.2. And I believe, Mr. Ames, you have an impartiality interest in two items, and correct me if I'm wrong, item 12.2 and 12.3, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move on to presentations or deputations. We have one deputation tonight from Mr. George Christos in respect to item 12.3, which is a draft right-of-way strategy. So welcome, Mr. Christos, to our online meeting, and I would welcome you to do your presentation, sir. Libby, is Mr. Christos available to do his deputation?
He's available, but he has to unmute his mic.
Mr. Christos, if you could unmute your mic and perhaps turn on your camera, that would be advantageous. Libby, are you in contact with Mr. Christos at all?
Not at the moment, but I will endeavour to call him now.
I can read out the statements by members of the public while we wait for Mr. Christos to return. So that's item 6. So I will proceed with reading out statements from members of the public. The first one is from Sam James of Mary Crescent in Eden Hill. It's regarding item 12.5, streetscape weed management. Regarding the proposal to switch from steam weeding to chemicals, I'd like to note my disagreement. Being so close to the river, we should be chemical reducing runoff and also not releasing harmful sprays into our communities. Please use steam weeding or other non-chemical means, even if it means our rates increase slightly. The next statement is from Val Humphreys of Whitfield Street, Bassendean, also in respect to item 12.5. There's a preamble. You may recognise my name as the email voice of Friends of Bindaring Wetland, but the statements below are mine and have not been endorsed by the Friends. I am very proud to be part of this town that is charting a course into non-toxic weeding and to be working to hold and rebuild the environmental health
Unknown participant is now exiting.
of our natural areas. My view is it could be reasonable to lift the ban to allow the treatment of invasive weeds in sealed surfaces, but only on a necessary basis, not part of the routine. Make that part of the tender specs. Perhaps the original ban was too focused on one concern, cancer in humans. Why does the report not address concerns about additives used to make the herbicide stick? My understanding is that these things are harmful to the environment, particularly for frogs, but also that I think that's bacteria in soil and water. Have councillors been briefed about that? If you go ahead with the rescission, then I think there should be more red areas on the map, attachment 5, page 262, around damp areas known as support that support frogs. For starters, that would be Bindaring, Hardy Road and Reed Street towards the river, around Mary Crescent, and probably more. I think it is culturally bereaved to nurture rhizome grasses on one side of the path, but confine it by drawing a line with poison around the edges. Such areas should remain on a steam weeding list, even though it is harder and more expensive. While I do understand that unwanted plants do not grow on non-permeable surfaces, I think it's important that we focus on water-sensitive urban design, and non-permeable surfaces are not that. So let's not solve all our problems that way. Improvements in non-toxic weed control go hand in hand with the development of water-sensitive urban design for our verges. It does not make sense to work to recharge the superficial aquifer if our municipal operations are deliberately contaminating it. I get that plants can destroy paving if left unchecked, but that can be managed with spot treatments, does not need to be scheduled in, write a good tender or organise in-house operations. I have been impressed with the way steam weeding has performed, recognising that the relationship between our sealed surfaces and the plant world is an ongoing conflict. We won't win, so need to manage the piece. Summary, let's lead the way with non-toxic weed treatments, investigate the new options if they look promising, but stick with steam weeding as the main treatment. The photo report was very helpful. Sorry, I should have printed this out a little bit bigger, but here we go. The next one is from Nonnie Jefferson in 6 Barton Parade, Bassendean. Dear Mayor, Councillors and CEO of the town of Bassendean, I'm writing to you regarding item 12.5 for this evening's
Unknown participant is now joining.
for this evening's
7269119.
Okay. I'm not sure if others in the meeting can hear these countdowns and what have you that I'm hearing, but I believe Mr. Christos has returned. Mr. Christos, if you can just give me a few minutes to read out the statements and then we will return to you. Okay, sir? The use of glyphosate-based herbicide was suspended in 2017 due to concerns about toxicity, both to humans and the aquatic environment. As you know, the town is a riverside suburb which contains a drainage network, wetlands and the unique TEC salt marsh ecosystem in Ashfield Flats. We have a responsibility to care for this environment. The toxicity of glyphosate to aquatic organisms is undisputed. GBH has also been shown to be detrimental to soil. The use of GBH on hard surfaces results in stormwater runoff being contaminated. Steam weeding, on the other hand, does not generate toxic residues. There's been much debate re GBH versus steam, and I will summarise the main points discussed here. Cost. There are concerns that steam weeding is more expensive than GBH. While a clear per household figure has not been identified, it is certain that GBH is cheaper in the short term. Increasing resistance to GBH by superweeds over time will increase these costs, while steam weeding becomes cheaper over time as the seed bank is destroyed by steam. The cost of maintaining a no-spray register and notifying affected residents prior to each GBH treatment will also add to the overall expense of GBH. Effectiveness. GBH is effective on most weeds if used at the correct time in their life cycle, but if applied too late, it can hasten the ripening of seeds and result in a greater weed load in subsequent seasons. There are a number of weeds which are known to have developed GBH resistance, and it can be less effective on perennial grasses such as hooch grass, requiring repeat applications, and then still may not eliminate this weed. Attached below is a chart of GBH resistant weeds. You may recognise some of these from around the town, in particular where they thrive on annual weeds such as those depicted in the chart below. Where weeds are deep-rooted and intractable, steam is less effective, and in these situations, a specific, systematic, once-off treatment may be required. It does not make sense to treat an entire town with GBH when a combination of steam and one-off grass-specific wipe-on treatment may be more effective. It must be said that unlike GBH, hand weeding, line trimming also removes the unsightly dead weeds, which in dense stands can represent a fire risk. Toxicity. This is still being debated, but it's understood that GBH acts as an antibiotic by interfering with the function of bacteria within the gut. The human body contains billions of microorganisms which aid in the digestion of food, among other things. Whilst most environmental exposure to GBH is via food, accidental exposure via curb spraying does occur. Attached link to a study on the effects of GBH on the gut is here. The toxicity of GBH to aquatic organisms, however, is not debatable. Other weed management options, there is potential to significantly reduce the spread of weed seeds within the town by adopting a more careful manner of verge and POS mowing. using a catcher, mowing the grass higher so bare patches are not created, mowing only when required, would go a long way to reducing the overall weed and dust load. The emergence of caltrop, similar to double G, within parts of the town has been attributed to mowing practices. I trust you will take these concerns into consideration when making your decision regarding the future of weed management within our town. And that concludes statements. Mr. Christos, so going back to deputations.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, did you want to also deal with the late statement from Ms Chambers?
Yes, I'll just have to bring that on my computer. So one last statement a very short statement from Angela Chambers of First Avenue, Eden Hill. This is also respect to agenda item 12.5. Please reconsider using chemical spraying in our town. It is a especially sensitive environment, being so close to the river, and has been seen in other councils. Steam weeding can be managed well. And that's the last of the statements as I understand it. Correct, Ms Mabs?
That's correct, Madam Mayor.
Okay. So going back to deputation.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Okay. Libby, has Mr Christos exited the meeting?
Yes, I'll try and reconnect once more. I'm sure it'll work out.
Okay. I might wait for a minute, Libby, because question time, there are a few questions and officers will need to answer. So I prefer to get Mr Christos back if we can, rather than going on to question time, which will entail Mr Christos waiting a bit longer.
Yes.
You have
That would
reached
be
a message box
Unknown participant is now joining.
6919.
Good evening, Mr Christos. I think you have joined the meeting. In which case I would request you to turn on your microphone and to turn on your camera. Libby, could you tell us the status of Mr Christos at the moment?
The camera and the audio should be working. They have been allowed. It says that there is audio and that the mic is functioning. It may be that the volume button on the mobile would need to be put up.
Okay, so clearly there's an issue there, councillors. So I will move on to question time, but I would ask the staff, if Mr Christos does come back and you can get video and sound, I will stop the question time to take Mr Christos's deputation. Would that be acceptable? Libby?
I would believe. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would believe it would be. Mr. Christos was able to access it previously. So I will probably call him once more. It's just a matter of.
Hello? Hello, I can hear you.
He's there.
Can you hear me?
Mr Christos, we can hear you now. That's
Can you?
excellent.
Good.
Would you like to commence your deputation, sir?
Okay. About 25 to 30 years ago, the council came along and resurfaced the right-of-way which runs along the side of my property and round the back. And when they done that, they actually dropped the surface of the right of way in the longest stretch right in the middle. It had like a hump. They dropped it by about a foot to 1.5 feet. And I've sent photographs. I sent photographs to Brian Reid that I'd taken before and after, which showed that this had happened. And then at the time when they resurfaced the right of way, the way they retained the sand, now I had a pile of sand on the other side of my fence, is to put slabs up against it. I was told by the foreman that they would come back and they would actually put a better retaining wall. As time passed by, I contacted council again, and they told me that they had to wait until next year, needed more funds. Then I just let it go. But then sometime later, probably maybe about 10 years ago now, I contacted council again, and Mr. Stuart Dawkins reckons he contacted that foreman, and that foreman said he didn't make that promise. But I don't care anyhow, because you did lower the surface, and you are in fact obliged to build the retaining wall. I then raised the matter again about 3 years ago, and I also got the mayor in fact I raised it about 5 years ago, and Bob Jarman and Callum Short came around, and they basically said that the retaining wall was fine for its purposes now. But 2 or 3 years ago, I contacted council again because my fence was falling over and I needed to rebuild my fence. And there's no way that I could rebuild a fence on sloping sand. So I needed to have a retaining wall there. Now, council didn't help me with that. So what I did is I took the left 5. Sorry, you there?
Yes, I can hear you, Mr. Christos. I believe that everyone, councillors, can hear you.
All right. Okay, good. Okay. Well, what
Your
happened?
recording has reached its maximum length. To end, press hash. To cancel, press star. To listen,
There's a
press
recording
1.
going over the top of you, Mr. Christos. If you can
Okay.
Message sent. Goodbye.
Are you there, Mr. Christos?
Yes, I'm
Unknown
here. It just had
participant is now
something
exiting.
talking over the top of me. All right. So anyhow, I had to. My fence was falling over, and basically Callum Short gave me an idea of what I could do to actually bypass everyone, and that was to build a retaining wall in the right of way itself, and that's exactly what I did. And as long as it was less than 50 centimetres high, I didn't need any sort of building approval, and the council had no right to ask me if I got approval from the owners. The fact of the matter is that I did get approval, and I've actually got it in writing as well. But I'm not going to show it to anyone because I don't have to. So I built this retaining wall, and then I sort of put up a fence. Now, just before Brian Reid left, I asked him again, why isn't council building this retaining wall? And he basically said to me, is because we don't own it. So the reason council could not build it is because you did not own it. So if you're taking it over, I want to receive some money from council for the money I spent building that retaining wall. I spent more than $12,000. I've got receipts for. I had to basically move about 30 cubic metres of sand and brick and slabs away. 30 cubic metres, that's probably about 90 tonnes. I had to buy all of the limestone blocks. I had to get a bobcat. I had to hire a trench digger and the person driving it. I had to get like 3 10 cubic metre bins, had to get sand, cement. I put the pathway there as well. But anyhow, I spent $12,000. I want to know, how much council is going to reimburse me.
Okay. So, Mr. Christos, during a deputation, and thank you for providing the deputation, this is an opportunity for councillors to ask you questions.
Okay.
Certainly, well, I'll ask councillors if there's any councillors who'd like to ask you questions at this time. And I cannot see any hands. Oh, yes. Councillor Ames, is that you, sir? Yes, Councillor Ames.
It is, Madam Mayor. It is, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Christos, for your deputation. Can I ask which right of way you are speaking in regards to, Mr. Christos?
I actually live at number 1 Kathleen Street, and the right of way is it's a no through right of way, and it comes along my beside my property, and it's parallel to Guildford Road, and it runs round the back of my property as well.
No worries. Thank you for that information. I believe Mr. Gibson would like to ask a question.
Yes, Mr. Gibson, you wish to contribute to this conversation?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in answer to Councillor Ames's question, Mr. Christos owns a property abutting right of way number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson.
Can I ask a question of Mr. Gibson before you leave? Can you refresh my memory with right of way number 9, what the recommendation is for that one? It's to upgrade, isn't it?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it's to retain.
Retain.
So it's right of way number 9. Mr. Christos's submission is submission number 46 on page 157 of the attachment.
Thank you for that. Any other councillors with questions? Mr. Christos, the right-of-way matter will be considered later on in the agenda.
Okay.
I'm sure there will be some questions for staff on this one when we get to it. I believe that you can continue to watch the meeting by live stream. So, Libby, if you could perhaps advise Mr. Christos how he may do that once he exits the deputation.
Yeah, I wanted to say one more thing as well, actually.
Certainly, Mr. Christos.
Yeah, the right-of-way actually goes around the back of my property as well. I have it on my title, but none of the houses on Kenny Street do. Council allowed number 24 Kenny Street and number 20 Kenny Street to build huge workshops at the back of their houses when they didn't have access. Right now, recently, someone, I think at number, I'll try to work it out, 20, 18, 16, I think at 14 Kenny Street, had to go to court so that he could build a carport at the back of his property and access it from the right of way. Now, these other people, you council allowed them to build these garages, and I'm not happy about that, because that right of way, if it was to be closed off, should be all mine. Should be all mine, because I'm the only one that had legal access to it. Okay, now, so I feel I've been hard I'm done by. So I think what should happen is that the other people at number 20 and 24 Kenny Street should have to pay to have access to it. All right, and technically, I mean, I should probably get paid as well, but at least they should have to pay for it, you know. And you can use that money to buy them the right of way, and I mentioned that as well. But you know, that's something I'm sorry,
Mr. Christos. I think that's something where we're venturing into speculation about what legally can and can't happen. I think those decisions to allow those developments were a very long time ago. Am I correct in that assumption?
No, one of them was only about 8 years ago. The other one was about 12 years ago.
So we would have to get some advice from the officers on that. But in any case, I think if we wait until we get to the item and councillors can ask questions on those matters, and perhaps the officers can give us a bit of an overview as well on that.
Yeah, but you know what I have at the moment? I have one guy who works on MG cars and one guy who works on big Dodge cars and, Chryslers. Both of them have got, about 5 cars each, and they've got these garages with 3 doors facing right into my house, all right? And I've had arguments with them about working at night time. And one of them used to work at 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night time, and I've had fights with him.
Mr. Christos, okay, I understand that you have some problems with the setup. I understand that. This is a deputation, so at the moment we've already gone over time on the deputation, and that's fine because we needed to hear your perspective. But I would ask you if we could move on, if we can allow the officers to answer councillor questions when we get to that item later on in the agenda. That would be
okay.
And
thank you.
Libby, could I ask you to advise Mr. Christos how he might be able to watch the live stream of the meeting when he exits with the deputation? Could you liaise behind the scenes with Mr. Christos on that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I will be able to. I will call Mr. Christos on his mobile.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Christos, for your presentation.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Have a good night. Thank you. Okay. So, councillors, if you bear with me for a minute. We'll move on to public question time, and I will read it out.
What the hell?
Mr.
I think that might be on.
If you turn off your microphone, that would be advantageous. Okay, so I will read out the questions and ask the respective officer to provide a response. The first question is from Mr. Yates of Thompson Road, Bassendean. Based on Bureau of Meteorology predictions for Perth, higher than average rainfall is predicted between now and the end of winter 2022. If the flooding level is, say, 0.5 metres deep, does the town of Bassendean administration accept that the new Sandy Beach playground could be almost completely flooded if a flood depth of 0.5 metre event was to happen?
I'm happy to answer that, Madam Mayor.
Certainly, Ms. Mabs.
Thank you. Hypothetically, if there's a flooding of 0.5 of a metre, some parts of the playground may be impacted, and that is further responded to in the next question.
Okay.
Thank you.
So question 2, while the flooding levels may not be as severe as Lismore in New South Wales, residents of Lismore may no longer be able to take out insurance policies to recover losses from flooding, with Sandy Beach Playground being in 1 in 25 year flooding area and major 7 major floods occur in 1862, 1872, 1910, 1945, 1963, 1964 and 1983. Does the town of Bassendean administration believe that a major flood will not happen in the next 25 years? I believe, Ms Davies, you might answer this one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So a 1 in 25 year flood event has an annual recurrence interval of 4%. So that means every year there's a 4% chance of it occurring. The town's not able to comment on whether the seasonal climate outlook will impact the chance of flooding of Sandy Beach Playground, but it's just worth noting that the latest seasonal outlook, which is for April to June, is for below median rainfall for the southwest of WA.
Thank you. There are various other questions from Mr. Yates. However, I understand that the administration will email responses to those questions. Is that correct, Ms. Mabbs?
That's correct, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is from Nonnie Jefferson of Barton Parade, Bassendean, regarding 12.5. Question 1, the town has proposed to revert to the spraying of glyphosate-based herbicide on hard surfaces. If GBH is safe, why is it not to be used near schools and daycare centres? Ms Davies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's no specific reason why we can't use Roundup Bioactive adjacent to these sensitive sites, as long as we consider the timing of application and communication with the adjacent premises. The use of steam in these locations is proposed as a compromise due to the community concerns around the use of glyphosate.
Thank you. Second question from Ms Jefferson. Has the town taken into consideration the expense and staff time required to maintain and enforce a no spray register of residents who do not wish to have their verges sprayed, and to send timely notifications to affected residents prior to undertaking GBH speed weed treatment? Ms Davies again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there might be some initial time involved in establishing the no spray register, but that can be managed with existing staff resources. We'll have a 3-month period to set that up. So there'll be an online form created. And should the residents who register for the no spray list, should they wish to be notified, we'll be able to set up a regular automated email that goes out a standard time frame before the programmed applications.
Thank you. Ms Mabbs, I've only got one more question from Ms Jefferson. So in the interest of fairness, I will actually do that third question and also go back to Mr Yates and read a third question from that gentleman as well, if you don't mind. So the third question, has the town considered reversing verge mowing practices to reduce the spread of weed seeds and the germination of weeds in bare patches of ground created by heavy mowing? Mr Adams, potentially, for this one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the town does have it on its action list to review our verge mowing, so that's likely to occur over the coming year. So that's on our plan approach.
Okay, so I'll read a question 3 from Mr Don Yates. Does the town of Bassendean administration believe that they hold insurance policies that would repair the Sandy Beach playground if a major flood incident was to happen? Ms Mabbs or Mr White?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The town's assets that make up the playground, so the benches and playground facilities and so on, they'll be listed on the town's property asset register, and they'll be covered by LGIS for the usual risks such as fire, storm, flooding, vandalism and the like.
Thank you, Mr White. There's only one more person with questions, which is why I allowed a few extra questions for the others. This last set of questions is from Mr Busby, Mr Bill Busby. Will the town consider funding of training for volunteer community groups for weed control and have these volunteers work in cooperation with the council's professional staff and under supervision? Ms Davies?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So for natural areas, the town currently works with a range of volunteers and different community and friends of groups who contribute with voluntary support, which include weed management. However, the use of herbicides by volunteers is not permitted. So the type of support that we provide includes funding, in-kind assistance with on-ground works, and also supervision and guidance. With regards to training, a revised bush care volunteer manual is currently being created,
which will include a provision for training to be offered to volunteers. If Mr. Busby's referring to volunteering in this streetscape, unfortunately, due to the requirements for traffic management and safety concerns, it's generally not possible. So if anyone would like further information or wish to be involved, they can contact the town's conservation officer or have a look at the existing Friends of groups, which are on the town's website under the Community Organisation Directory.
Thank you. And the last question for this evening, and also from Mr. Busby, will the town follow up on the EMRC having ownership of weed control equipment to hire or loan? From some correspondence, I note that there could be 50 or more good people to volunteer to assist the town that we all care about. Ms. Davies?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Due to the nature of the steam weeding, so for the town of Bassendean, it's preferable to contract out the service rather than hiring equipment. It's just more efficient and more effective.
Thank you, Ms. Davies. Item 8 is petitions. I don't believe we have any petitions. So we will move on to item 9.1, which is confirmation of ordinary council meeting held on the 22nd of February 2022. The officer's recommendation that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 22nd of February 2022 be received. Do I have a mover? I have Councillor McWilliam moving, Councillor Wilding seconding. Do I have anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. Councillor McWilliam, you raised your hand. Is this for the next one? Councillor McWilliam?
Sorry, no, it's just because I haven't taken my hand down yet. Sorry, beg your pardon.
Okay, thank you. 9.1A, that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 22nd of February be received. I've just done that. 9.1B, that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 22nd of February 2022 be confirmed as a true record. And I have a mover, Councillor McWilliam, seconded Councillor McLennan. Is there anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. There is no business deferred from a previous meeting. So we have external committee reports and updates. And the officer's recommendation for 11.1, that council notes the attached documents from external committee meetings held within the reporting period. Do I have a mover for 11.1? Councillor McLennan, seconded. I'll second that. Is there anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. So we'll move on to item 12, which is the reports. And first item that we'll be dealing with is the en bloc. Now, I shall read out what's coming out of en bloc. And excuse me, councillors, while I just move a document. So coming out of en bloc, I have 12.2, 12.3, 12.4, 12.5, 12.6, 12.7, 12.8, 12.13, 13.1, which is a notice of motion, 16.1 and 16.2. Do I have any other items to be pulled out of en bloc? So can I have a mover for items 12.9, 12.10, 12.11 and 12.12 to be moved en bloc. Councillor McLennan, seconded Councillor McWilliam. Anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. Councillor McWilliam, your hand is up.
Sorry. Oops. Just bear with me for a sec.
That's okay. Now, councillors, I note that item 16.1, which is under confidential business, that there is a planned workshop on this item. So with this item, I would like to move a procedural motion to defer. And I have a seconder, Councillor McLennan. Do I have anyone against? So I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you for that, councillors. So we'll now move into the reports. So the first report that we have to deal with tonight is item 12.2, which is the Bassendean Oval business case. And I would invite our Director of Community Planning, Mr. Gibson, to speak to this. If you would like to speak to this, Mr. Gibson.
Through you, Madam Mayor, probably only one comment is that I believe there is an amendment put forward by Councillor Ames with regards to the potential to request the funding sources relinquish their funding to the Swan Districts Football Club for use as part of their future business planning efforts. And in terms of the staff's response to that proposed amendment, we've got no objection.
Okay, councillors, are there any questions on this item before we actually move to the recommendations or the alternative motion? Councillor Ames, would you like to move your... We've got an officer recommendation and we've also got a proposed amended alternative. Councillor Ames, you can move the officer's recommendation with your amendment if you like.
Yes, please. As per the proposed amendments that have been sent out prior to the meeting, I'd like to move that.
Okay, so councillors, do you have in front of you the amendment that Councillor Ames has proposed? Councillor Ames, perhaps you would like to read it out, or I can read it out for you, whatever you prefer. But my reading of it, you've only added an extra dot point to the officer's recommendation. No, that's not correct.
Yes, I'm more than happy to read that out, Madam Mayor. That's fine. Yes. So item 12.2, the Bassendean Oval business case, that council ceases its involvement with the Bassendean Oval business case project as currently scoped. Acknowledges that whilst it has resolved to cease its involvement with the Bassendean Oval business case, where possible, continued liaison and discussion with the Swan Districts Football Club regarding matters affecting Bassendean Oval, including but not limited to the future development of the reserve site. And point number 3, to request that the CEO approaches the funding contributors in order to seek to redirect funds to Swan Districts Football Club to support their future endeavours in the planning of a new football facility.
Now, I'll just ask Ms Holmes, our minutes clerk, if you have got that. Ms Holmes?
Yes, all good, thank you.
Okay, and we have a seconder with Councillor Polifka. So I'd ask if there's anyone against. With no one being against, I will declare that carried unanimously. So we will move on to item 12.3, which is the draft right-of-ways strategy, where I have a proximity interest, and I would invite Deputy Mayor Renee McLennan to preside over this item for the meeting whilst I leave for a short while. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, I believe that Mayor Hamilton is leaving the meeting, so we can consider item 12.3. So councillors being asked to consider the draft rights of way strategy for final adoption, and the revoking of council policies 1.6, maintenance of rights of way policy, and 1.20, the right of way closure. I was just hoping that Mr Gibson might first be able to respond to the deputation that was provided on this item a little earlier by Mr Christos, and maybe particularly in relation to the historical situation that has arisen with the right-of-way adjacent to his property.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I suppose just reiterating my previous comment is just for councillors' benefit, Mr Christos's submission was submission number 46 on page 157, and that was in response to the proposal relating to right-of-way number 9, which is just to the west side of Kenny Street there in Bassendean. What Mr Christos said in his deputation broadly reflected the written submission that he previously provided, and largely deals with a legacy issue that's broadly outside the scope of the strategy. The town is aware that there are multiple properties abutting the right-of-way which do not have implied access, as suggested by Mr Christos, and on the reason they have not got that implied access under the Transfer of Land Act is that they were not created on the same deposited plan. That is, it wasn't created as part of the same subdivision. That said, it's obviously the town's recommendation that the right-of-way be retained and the right-of-way be formally dedicated for that purpose, which would effectively resolve the access issues that Mr Christos refers to. In terms of retaining walls from 20 or 30 years ago, like I say, that is a legacy issue, and certainly not doubting that the money was spent by Mr Christos to build his retaining wall, but that is a matter outside the scope of this strategy.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr Gibson. Councillors, are there any questions for the officers on this item? Okay, so if there's no questions, councillors, Councillor Ames.
Thank you very much, Deputy Madam Mayor, and through you to Mr Gibson. Just reading and please correct me if I shouldn't be speaking at this point in time regarding the amendment of the motion. The scenario where we are changing or replacing a phrase with "there is currently one property using row 5 for rear caravan access." The strategy recommends that row 5 be closed, acknowledging that the closure may occur in 2 stages depending on the redevelopment of lot 778. That is the replaced phrase in the strategy. Just through you, Deputy Madam Mayor, to Mr Gibson, the scenario where it says the closure may occur in 2 stages doesn't seem to have a time frame, or I suppose some specifics regarding the closure in stages. Can you please speak to that, as there's been no objection to the proposed amendment from the officers?
So just before Mr Gibson addresses that, so I'm sure councillors are following, but Councillor Ames is referring to a proposed amendment that I circulated earlier that was specifically relating to the right-of-way number 5 in response to requests from certain property owners abutting that right-of-way and the proposed closure of right-of-way 5 in the draft strategy to be linked to the redevelopment of lot 778. Mr Gibson.
Through Madam Mayor. I suppose firstly I'd say the staff have no objection to that proposed amendment. It certainly acknowledges that there is a garage which relies upon access from the right of way, but also acknowledges that the bulk of owners abutting the right of way to the east of that garage have a strong desire, it seems, for it to be closed. So what the strategy was recommending, but what this further reiterates is that both desires can be satisfied by way of effectively disconnecting them, insofar as the eastern 160 square metres can be actioned as a matter of priority by the affected landowners without being delayed by the potential redevelopment aspirations or otherwise of the owner of lot 778. So therefore the western portion, which is probably about 40 metres long, can remain as long as is required by the owner of lot 778, but the balance to the east can be dealt with far sooner if the landowners desire.
Just to follow on from Councillor Ames' query, he was questioning the lack of timeframes, but the strategy doesn't identify timeframes for any of these projects at this point, and it's going to be linked to any budget considerations that council might have in future. That's my understanding. Would that be an accurate reflection, Mr. Gibson?
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, that's correct. And particularly with recommendations for closure, in most cases, it's going to rely upon the affected landowners being able to strike an agreement for the redistribution of the right-of-way land. So for right-of-way 5, for argument's sake, if those landowners abutting the 160 metre section to the east of lot 778 wish to do that as a high priority, it's certainly within their power to get together, prepare a consolidated plan and engage with the town to advance the closure. But as you say, Madam Deputy Mayor, the strategy is a high-level strategic document, as the name suggests, and doesn't contain any timeframes.
Thank you for that. Councillor Ames, did you have further questions?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Deputy Madam Mayor, and through you to Mr. Gibson as well. Just in regards to the redevelopment opportunity for lot 778, which I believe is number 60, Scadden Street. Please correct me if I'm wrong. What would happen if there was communication with those other properties on Scadden Street, namely 62 and 64, that would like to, I suppose, take their portion or purchase their portion of the right-of-way before the development application for 60 Scadden Street? I'm just thinking into the future that there might be some communication that might not be quite friendly between these particular blocks of land. So could you be able to maybe just to describe what may occur in that situation?
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Lot 778 is in fact number 62 Scadden Street. So
sure.
It's the first block back from Penzance Street. So it occupies the portion of the right-of-way between 20 and 40 metres from Penzance. If, say, the landowner at number 67, 67 Broadway, I believe it is, wanted to acquire the rear portion of, acquire the right-of-way at the rear of their property, that would obviously hamper access to the rear of lot number 62, lot 778. So in that instance, I would suggest the town would probably have a presumption against the closure of the right-of-way unless number 62 Scadden had already developed such that the need for access to the garage became redundant. And in terms of the initial component of the question from you, Councillor Ames, lot 778 is zoned residential R20 under the local scheme and is a bit over 1,000 square metres. So there is certainly development potential and subdivision potential for that site.
Thank you.
Not a problem at all. Thank you very much, Mr. Gibson.
Okay, great. So, councillors, while we're asking questions about potential amendments, you've probably noticed there's also an amendment proposed by Councillor Polifka, which hopefully you've got a copy of. So that's in relation to rights of way 1, 4 and 5.
I might like to intervene to clarify. In respect of the second part, so part B, that's covered by your amendment. So what I would be seeking to do is, if you were to move the officer's recommendation with your amendment, then I would simply seek to add my part A as part 1C to your notice of motion. But yes, that just relates to then the part which is different to what you're proposing. It just relates to right-of-ways 1 and 4. And I might just note that there's a slight typographical error in the document that I've circulated, where it should read appropriate density to be applied to the transit corridors that run parallel to right-of-way 1 and 4, being the two rights-of-way that I'm addressing in the proposed amendment.
Okay, so in that case, unless there's any further questions, is that a question, Councillor Ames, or have you just not taken your hand down?
Sorry, Madam Deputy Mayor, hand is down.
Okay, thank you. Well, in that case, I am happy to move the officer recommendation with my amendment. So just so that everybody is clear, that is point 1 of the officer recommendation would then become that Council 1 adopts the draft amended rights of way strategy as contained in attachment A with the following changes. Amend the recommendation for right of way 5 on page 17 to replace future closure with closure, and amend the right-of-way assessment for right-of-way 5 in attachment A to replace there is currently 1 property using right-of-way 5 for rear caravan access. The strategy recommends that the formal closure of right-of-way 5 be delayed until this property redevelops. There is currently 1 property using right-of-way 5 for rear caravan access. The strategy recommends that right-of-way 5 be closed, acknowledging that the closure may occur in 2 stages depending on the development of lot 778. So I'm happy to move that. Councillor Polifka, I noted your amendment that you're proposing. If you're willing to second this, I'm very happy to incorporate your proposed amendment into the substantive motion.
Absolutely happy to do so. Thank you, Deputy.
So that would then add an additional change at point 1 of the resolution, and that change would be the rights of way designated as right of way 1 and right of way 4 are to be retained until the town has investigated the appropriate density to be applied to the transit corridors that run parallel to right of way 1 and right of way 2. And I apologise, Councillor Polifka, your correction that you just flagged wasn't included there.
No, so the last mention of right of way 2, or being the only mention of right of way 2, should be a reference to right of way 4.
Right of way 4. Ms Holmes, can I just check that you're clear on what that is?
Yes, all good here, thank you.
Great. Okay, so I've moved the officer recommendation with those 2 changes, and Councillor Polifka has seconded that. If there's no questions on those amendments, I'll put that to the vote. So is there anybody against? Fabulous. So that is carried unanimously. Can I please ask Ms Kanya if you can re-invite Mayor Hamilton back into the meeting, please?
I will do that now.
Thank you, everyone. A little while to get the buttons to work. So I assume we are now on to item 12.4. And thank you, Deputy Mayor, for presiding over that last item. So draft local planning policy, sustainable development. And I would ask the Officer, Mr. Gibson, I believe, to speak to this item.
Through you, Madam Mayor, nothing to add particularly, but I'm aware that Councillor McLennan has a possible amendment that she wishes to raise, and happy to take questions on that.
So I'll open it to councillors who would like to ask questions. Okay, we have Councillor Polifka first, followed by Councillor McLennan.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Gibson. So if we are to advertise the Sustainable Development Policy as amended, are we, in advertising that policy, able to, when that policy goes out for advertising, have accompanying that a question as to whether it is the community's preference that that would apply to all dwellings that, as referred to in the draft policy, or if that should just be restricted to the split density. So it would be, are we able to accompany our draft with a question identifying a particular aspect of the draft? So not having multiple options, but just saying this is our draft. Would you, what is your view on that being narrowed in scope, I suppose?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so under the regulations, the town is required to advertise a draft policy as in a single document for the community's sort of consideration and response. But in saying that, it's certainly open to the town, based on any desires from council, to seek comment on particular aspects of the policy and actually provide, I suppose, prompts to the community members to assist them with actually answering or providing a response to the town, and ultimately informing council's future decision on as to whether it should adopt the policy or not, or whether it should adopt the policy in a similar form. So short answer would be yes, there is scope for the town to supplement its normal, I suppose, referral arrangements by asking a few probing questions and a few things that might provoke a response to guide council's future decision making.
Thank you.
Councillor McLennan.
Thank you. I didn't actually have a question. It was more that you were referring to the proposed amendment, but we hadn't articulated that. So I was conscious that anybody who may be listening wouldn't be aware of what the amendment being discussed entails.
Correct. So, so we have an officer's recommendation, but we also have a proposed amendment by yourself, Councillor McLennan. If you would like to, are you proposing to move that amendment?
I'm happy to move it, but I'm also happy to read it out to make sure everyone's understanding what it is we're discussing, if you would like me to do so.
Yes, I would like you to read it out. Thank you very much.
Okay, so just adding on to the end of the officer recommendation, which is council agreeing to advertise the draft, I was proposing to add the following amendments to incorporate them. So one, to the application, that it applies to all residential development for single houses, group dwellings and multiple dwellings up to and including R35 only. Two, that new dwellings with single residential density code must comply with requirements 6.11 C, D and E and 6.1.2. Requirements for split residential density code seeking approval at the middle or higher dense residential coding remain as drafted. And three, incorporates the following change at 6.1 of the policy: roof colour, flat roof structures that are not visible from the street or adjacent properties. So changing the figure to 0.5 from what is currently within the policy. So therefore requiring lighter roofs to be provided within the town.
Councillor McLennan, you at the beginning of that sentence mentioned flat roofs, but it's actually the pitched roofs that you're proposing to
Yes,
go
I was trying to provide a shortcut without reading out the whole sentence, but you're correct. It's referring to the flat roof and pitch roof structures. So I'm proposing to leave the 0.4 for the flat roof structures, but changing the pitch roof structures to 0.5.
Okay. So, councillors, are there any further questions on this item? Sorry, Councillor Plifka.
So just in terms of those figures, your 0.4 and your 0.5, perhaps if through yourself, Madam Mayor, if the Director Gibson could provide some comments on what that translates to in terms of actual colours. I mean, what colours are we prohibiting?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't have the actual chart in front of me, but I'd suggest by reducing the maximum solar absorbance for pitched roofs from 0.6 to 0.5, you're probably removing about 4 or 5 colours. In the sort of the mid-green tones, generally the darker colours, the blacks and the ebonies and the very dark greys are sort of up at your 0.7, 0.8, 0.9. So the ones hemmed in between 0.5 and 0.6 are typically the sort of the mid-greens. But I will find the chart and I can distribute it to councillors if you like.
Okay, but in terms of, I suppose, the other part of the amendment dealing with heritage would still permit the use of your heritage red and your heritage green, which are a little bit darker?
Through Madam Mayor, precisely, and I suppose that's the purpose of that provision, is to have a presumption for a certain maximum solar absorbance, but where there is another framework which calls for something else, typically around character and heritage, those frameworks would prevail.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Gibson, I have a question following on from that. Given that this is proposed to go out to advertising, would it not be preferable to advertise all the aspects and the aspirations of council and to get the community feedback rather than to make additions to the policy when it comes back from advertising? In other words, is it not possible to pare it back should we get feedback from the community that indicates their preferences or otherwise?
Through Madam Mayor, certainly, like with every other local planning policy we've reviewed or every other local planning policy we've prepared, council is asked to endorse it for the purposes of advertising, and that endorsement goes no further than for the purposes of advertising. It doesn't fetter council's subsequent decision-making role following advertising. Once council has the benefit of any submissions received through the consultation process, it is open to council to consider every aspect of the policy and either ratchet it up or pull it back, or indeed not proceed with the policy at all, or alternatively adopt it without any further changes. So council's adoption of the policy tonight, hopefully for the purposes of advertising, doesn't bind any future decisions it might make.
Thank you very much. So moving back to councillors, if there are no more questions, I will ask if we have a mover. And I can't see any hands going up for questions. So
Councillor Hamilton, I thought I'd moved it with my amendment.
Thank you. So Councillor McLennan has moved her amendment. Do we have a seconder? We have Councillor Wilding. Do we have anyone against? Councillor Palifka.
Yeah, I was the amendment that I foreshadowed before. Am I able to raise that amendment? I mean, it may well be accepted.
My understanding is that we are dealing with Councillor McLennan's amended motion, and you could ask Councillor McLennan to whether she would, as the mover of the motion, incorporate any additions.
So, Mayor Hamilton, if I may, I have no issue with Councillor Kalifka's proposal, but I'm just wondering if that's just a operational task that the staff have heard the request from councillors and would be able to deliver as part of the consultation.
Mr. Gibson?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if Councillor Kalifka's amendment was indeed in relation to the consultation process, that's something that staff can certainly take note of and doesn't actually require a change to the recommendation.
Councillor Kalifka, are you happy with that?
Yeah, no, satisfied with that. Just wanted to make sure that we get the best information back from the community.
That would be appropriate. So we have Councillor McLennan has moved her amendments. Councillor Wilding has seconded. I will ask now, do we have anyone against? And not seeing any other hands going up, I will declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. So we now move on to item 12.5. which is review of streetscape weed management. And just to advise that I have put forward an amended motion as well for this one. So first of all, I'll ask Ms Davies to speak to this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Should I comment on your amended recommendation or just the general report?
You may proceed whichever way you prefer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I've just made some amendments which are in red to answer some of the questions that were asked at the briefing session. So there's additional sections added relating to the Plants to Residents and Verge rebate programs that we have that can assist in reducing the weeds in the streetscape. There's also some additional information on what other local governments are doing with steam weeding and with other non-chemical methods. And a table's been included to show the cost comparison of steam compared to Roundup Bioactive as well.
Thank you. So, councillors, does anyone have any questions of the officer on this item? Councillor McLennan.
I have quite a number of questions, so I'll ask two, and then if anybody else has questions, I'll give them the opportunity, but I do have more than two if that's okay.
That's fine.
So first of all, Ms Davies, thanks for updating the report with the information about Fremantle and Subiaco's steam weeding. I'm still interested to know if we've got any information around what cost they are incurring for their steam weeding and whether it's financially viable for them, and if we've got any information about whether it's achieving the outcomes that their officers are satisfied with.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we don't have details on the cost, just the frequency. So City of Subiaco undertakes it fortnightly, which is quite frequent, and City of Fremantle for their city centres undertakes it
Ms Davies,
City of Fremantle,
Ms Davies, you froze there for a little bit and we missed that part about City of Fremantle.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
So City of Fremantle undertake it 6 times per year in the city centre and twice per year elsewhere. We have spoken to just an individual officer from both locations, and they've both indicated it's relatively satisfactory in terms of the weed management. We also spoke to another local government who are looking to get a quote or a tender at the moment, and that they've used a different approach where they are requiring a certain weed control outcome, and are leaving it up to the respondents to indicate how they'll achieve that. So that would be quite interesting to see what frequencies and the costs that come back from that.
Thank you. And just a second question for now, if you don't mind. In your report, you make mention of the potential opportunity for us to trial the electric weed machine. I'm just wondering when we will know if we definitely are going to have that opportunity and whether you think that's got the potential to be a viable option.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So we should know shortly after the meeting in April, which is with the organisation that's undertaking the trial. And I think we would only know after the trial's been completed if it's a viable option based on the results of the trial.
Thank you. Ms Davies, can I ask a further question about that, the trial? If we find out that we've been selected for the trial, what timeline are we looking at? I believe it was later in the year. Is that correct? Ms Davies?
Yeah, sorry, Madam Mayor. So was that the time frame for when the trial would be undertaken?
Correct.
I'd have to confirm, but it would be in the next few months, so relatively soon.
Okay, and is the trial for a small select area? How extensive is the trial if we are successful?
The location that we've nominated is near Success Hill Reserve. So it's a verge area next to the road and also a brick pathway in the reserve. And we've suggested one other location as well that has a variety of different weeds. So those two locations.
Okay, so it's a small area compared to our town in total. Thank you for that. Before I ask, and before Councillor Clinton asks any more questions, I'd ask other councillors if you have questions. Councillor Polifka.
Yes, just in terms of potential damage to the or degradation of the hard surfaces if we embark on a course which differs from the officer's recommendation, so whereby the method that we adopt is not as effective as that which was proposed. Do we have, and it might be, I'm not sure which director might want to answer that one, but do we have a holding or a view on the review on the costs, or the increased cost due to the shortened lifespan of that hard infrastructure as a result of a change to this alternate method?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if you don't mind, I'm happy to jump in there. Yes, look, Councillor, look, it is a wide-ranging question and a difficult one to answer at this point, but it is well known that weeds do lead to the infrastructure assets degradation, and I think weed growth and tree growth is probably one of the main issues that that particularly paths and to a lesser extent roads have to, and drainage has to, we have to undertake maintenance to ensure that the degradation doesn't result in it being too significant. But, you know, to ascertain that the value is really difficult to say. So although one could say that it is, it would increase, yeah.
And just on that, in terms of the time frame for the investigation into this, which is provided of the 4-year time span, would that be sufficient time for you to be able to monitor the changes and to form a view as to how much that would degrade those hard surfaces, if at all? Is that something you'd be able to do in tandem with the trials of the various methods, less offensive methods of dealing with weeds? Director Adams, is that something you'd be able to get a hold of through that 4-year investigation?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Councillor, I believe that, not that I've undertaken this before, but I believe a 4-year time span would be enough to look at, to make an analysis. But there's probably some research out there as well that we could, desktop research that we can look into as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that.
With your indulgence, Councillor McLennan, can I just ask a follow-on question of Mr. Adams on that one? Mr. Adams, if we continued the steam wheeling for the Tier 3 roads until June 2023, with the ability to do spot treatments on those areas that have some signs of degradation of the infrastructure, would that not slow down any major degradation of infrastructure on the Tier 3 roads? That's my first part of my question, if you want to answer that first.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I think so. Look, you know, having blanket bans, I think, is creating significant issues. I think if we can incorporate spot spraying, I think that can really help. I suppose we might need to define spot spraying to make sure that we do have an aligned agreement between the administration and council. But yeah, I think that's something that we can achieve, Madam Mayor.
So, and if that was undertaken until June 2023, with the ability for the administration to bring information back to councillors, would that give you the freedom to reassess the situation in what are we now? We're March, so in less than 18 months. Would that be appropriate for you in your position, given your needs to control infrastructure degradation?
Yeah, through Madam Mayor. Yes, look, I think there'll be a degree. You know, obviously we probably want some more time, but I think there's some response that we can there's some analysis and some response that we can come up with in that time frame. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor McLennan, I'm sure you have some other questions.
Thank you. So just going back to the previous line of questioning around the alternative options that we might have in future, so in particular the electric weeding that we will hopefully be trialling very soon. Just with that that potential sort of in the fairly near future, I'm wondering when our current contract with our steam weeders expires, and if there's a need for us to make that decision for you said you wanted until June 2022 to allow a new tender to be developed?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So the current contract expires at the end of June, and we haven't commenced the process for a new tender.
Okay, and is there are there any contractors out there who are providing alternatives like the electric weed machine that we'd be able to include in that tender specification?
There's no electric weeders currently, so it's being trialled at the moment. So that service isn't available in Western Australia. And there's not really any alternatives. We've looked at what the local government reference group are doing. The majority, if they are using alternatives to glyphosate, are using steam weeding. The other alternatives are to look at the frequency, increasing the frequency. But even with this, you know, the regular treatment of the Tier 1 roads, we've just seen that the weeds are continuing to regrow each month. So it doesn't, from that point of view, it doesn't seem to be effective.
So just on that comment about the frequency, so if I read it correctly, the recommendation that you've made to continue steam treatments around sensitive areas like playgrounds and schools and childcare centres and so on. Do I read it right? The recommendation is to increase that to 5 times per year?
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, and that's just to deliver a better amenity outcome than what you're seeing at the moment. Okay. And I'm just also interested in your thoughts on the proposal that was raised by Val Humphrey in her statement, where she was referring to the potential to continue to use steam around what some of the community may also consider sensitive areas that are damp and that are close to our waterways. That's not something that's addressed in your report, and I was just wondering if you had anything on that particular proposal that you'd like to share.
Through you, Madam Mayor, because this relates to weed control on the streetscape, there's very little direct contact with wetland areas. And then conversely, all of the streetscape eventually does run off when it rains into the Swan River. So it's difficult to select particular locations that aren't within the catchment of the Swan River. But all of the advice and information we have on Roundup Bioactive is that it's able to be used near wetlands. So it's recommended in the Department of Water and Environmental Regulations water notes for use near wetlands. And the particular type of Roundup, which is Roundup Bioactive, has a surfactant in it that is much less harmful to frogs than other types of herbicides. And by the time that it runs off into these areas, it would have degraded so as not to have an impact. So that's the reason why we're not looking at different treatments close to wetlands or in areas that run off into a wetland area.
Are there any other councillors who'd like to ask questions? Otherwise, I'd like to ask Ms Davies a question on her response to a portion of my suggested amendment. Ms Davies, you've indicated currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, currently Tier 3 roads, which make up the majority of our roads, are receiving 2 steam treatments a year. And the suggestion here is that if my amendment is adopted, that we move to 3 treatments a year for those Tier 3 roads until June 2023. I'm just curious about why that extra treatment is now being recommended for Tier 3 roads for steam treatment, particularly if you have the ability to spot treat problem areas with other forms of weed control.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in the original amendment, which is attachment B, we're proposing for all areas that were treated with steam to be treated 5 times per year. That's areas next to sensitive sites. And our recommendation is that 2 treatments per year is not sufficient and at least 3 would be required.
Okay. Let me frame this correctly. In the report, the 5 times per year was a recommendation for those areas which were not going to receive anything other than steam, correct? That was playgrounds and sensitive, right. So what I'm saying is that the Tier 3 roads, where I'm suggesting that we retain steam treatments for Tier 3 roads with the additional option of officers being able to use spot weed treatment of other types when and if the need arises. I'm questioning, with that additional facility to treat problem areas, do you still believe that it's necessary to do 3 steam weed treatments a year on Tier 3 roads when they have up until now only been receiving 2 treatments?
So the ability to spot spray is only if there's signs of damage to infrastructure. So we wouldn't be able to spot spray if the weeds were regrowing. So the recommendation for the 3 treatments is really if we want to maintain a streetscape that doesn't have weed growth in it. And otherwise, there's also the potential risk that you may have lots of locations that have signs of degradation where we have to go back and spot spray them. So the 3 steam treatments is trying to avoid that problem happening and also to result in a more a better outcome with the aesthetics of the streetscape.
Okay. Just a last question from me. If we extended the steam weeding for Tier 3 streets until June 2023, does this not provide adequate time for the staff to investigate the electric weed option and also any other emerging technologies, and to potentially come back to council with other recommendations as per my amendment, which says to provide information every 12 months? Would this not provide you with a stepping stone, for lack of a better word, to alternatives as they become available?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Councillors, do we have any more questions for the officers? So we have an officer recommendation, but we also have my proposed amendment, and I'm actually moving the officer's recommendation with my amendments, and I would ask if I've got a seconder for that. I have Councillor Polifka. There's a few hands that went up there.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy to second that.
Right. And do I have anyone against? So with no hands, Councillor Carter, are you against or you're asking a question?
No, I'm against the recommendation, even with your amendments, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And I think I saw Councillor McLennan's hand go up briefly for a second there.
Mayor Hamilton, I was just wondering again, wanted to read out your amendment for the benefit of people who would be listening.
Yep. Thank you for that. So before we move on, I will read out my amendment. So 12.5, review of streetscape weed management, that Council 1 rescinds Council Resolution OCM 12.4.16 Part 3, which reads, suspends the use of glyphosate on hard surfaces in the urban environment. 2, rescinds Council Resolution OCM 8.5.17 Part 1, which reads, upholds the suspension of the use of glyphosate on hard surfaces in the urban environment as per Council Resolution OCM 12.4.16, and 3, notes that steam weeding of hard surfaces within streetscapes will continue until 30th of June 2022, following which a new integrated weed management approach will commence as summarised in Attachment B with the following amendments. Point, that provision be made to continue steam weeding for all Tier 3 hard surfaces, local access roads, until June 2023, with some spot spraying of herbicides or alternative treatments permitted where there is demonstrated instances of weeds causing damage to infrastructure. Point, requests the CEO to enter into discussions with MRWA to take back maintenance of the Guildford Road medians. Point, trials new or alternative methods of weed control with the aim to phase out use of glyphosate on hard surfaces within the road reserves over the next 4 years. Point 4, requests the CEO to provide councillors with an assessment of the overall streetscape weed management each year. Point 5, requests a review of the town's mowing programs and equipment with an aim to reduce the weed seed bank throughout the district. And point 6, requests allocation of $10,000 for consideration in the 2022-23 budget for the co-funding of water-wise grants for verge transformation projects in the lead up to winter planting periods during the 2022-23 financial year. So I had Councillor Polifka second that. And Councillor Carter, you are still against, I assume?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so we will enter into debate, and I shall start off. Now, this argument about weed management can get very heated and quite extreme. And I did pore over the documents considerable length of time over the past weeks. And I do understand that Councillor Carter has a notice of motion regarding sensitive areas like playgrounds that will be coming up, and that will be considered and obviously debated and probably passed into part of this management process. But that is for sensitive areas like playgrounds and schools, etc. But we're not debating that tonight. What we're talking about is the hard surfaces in the town and looking for a compromise that will provide some way forward for the staff whilst they continue to look for alternative methodologies that will deal with weeds. Now, weeds are a wide variety, and some may respond to steam, some may not. Some may respond to glyphosate, some may not. The debate goes on and on. In the meantime, as councillors, we need to actually look at the benefits that can be derived from providing a program of works that will allow for the best combination of treatments. And I believe that Tier 3 streets cover the majority of the town, including near sensitive areas like wetlands and schools and what have you. So Tier 3 streets cover many of those areas. The contentious streets, Tier 1 and Tier 2, well, Guildford Road, as in my amendment, I've requested that we hand back the management of Guildford Road to Main Roads. Clearly there's a large expense associated with Tier 1 and Tier 2. Now, most of those Tier 1 and Tier 2 roads, the main roads, are not embedded in our areas that have a great deal of family housing. I think that giving the staff the ability to move forward with a range of treatments also allows them to trial new technologies, and the request for them to come back to us with information on an annual basis, I believe that we will move forward in a proactive way. But for this moment in time, I do think we need a combined approach to some of our areas. So I ask you to support my amendment. Thank you. Councillor Polifka.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, first I'd like to thank Ms Davey for the comprehensive information that she's provided to us on this, I suppose, somewhat emotive issue. So again, thanking our administration for the professionalism they've showed in relation to this. What I've heard from the community is that, and one person had said that this evening, is that they do understand that there's going to be increased costs, and they understand that that may well result in higher rates. But if that's something which is important to the community, we're happy to accommodate that. But we can only accommodate that to the extent that it doesn't unduly damage our infrastructure and cause larger expenses down the track, which people may or may not be happy with in terms of how their rates might need to change. So in terms of a compromise between these various considerations, I'd like to commend to Council the endeavours of the Mayor in seeking to knit all of those together in a workable way, and in a way which does heed community concern, but at the same time takes an evidence-based approach and says, well, let's conduct these investigations and let's see where they take us. So it's demonstrating that Council definitely has an open mind on this, and we're looking to work with the community to reach the best outcome. At the same time, we are monitoring all matters so that we don't find ourselves unduly damaging our infrastructure and then having to have a more difficult conversation in future when rates start to escalate. So I thank the Mayor for her work on this, and would commend it to Council.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I might turn the camera off because we're starting to freeze. So if that's okay with you?
That's fine, Councillor Carter.
Thank you. Okay. Now, first of all, let me state from the outset that a great deal has been done by former Mayor Renee McLennan, councillors, staff and the town's environmental officers to minimise the use of herbicides. Important in this are partnerships with our local environmental groups, such as the Bassendean Preservation Group, various friends groups and so on, who regularly handweed and carry out replanting of our parks and reserves. Now, they're marvellous and deserve all credit, and I think Bassendean in this respect has been a model for other local government authorities, and we should be grateful for the leadership shown. I think this is very clear that rescinding this motion that has been passed in 2016 and confirmed in 2017 is a retrograde step. There's a whole lot of other peripheral issues that have come around, like damage to hard surfaces. We don't seem to have any real evidence or real costs about this, and perhaps we should get all those things before we think about rescinding a motion that is, well, some of the times it hasn't worked. But anyway, to get back to the recommendation, we've been told two things. The first is that the use of Roundup Bioactive or glyphosate is strictly controlled. Now, it would be a backward step at this point to rescind this, because we certainly do not need to be increasing the use of toxic herbicides, particularly when we do not have a transparent and close monitoring, supervision, reporting and sanctioning mechanism in place. Nor do we have a robust documented complaint and response system. And without those, I can't see how the monitoring is keeping pace with the concerns. The second is that despite an abundance of notices of caution about using glyphosate, it is declared to be safe to use. What we do know, and what the makers of Roundup agree, is that their product is a toxin and needs to be used with extreme care, and nobody knows what the long-term effects will be. And we also know that glyphosate is currently banned in many states in the USA, countries in Europe and in Asia. So there's no doubting glyphosate's potency as a plant killer, nor its usefulness as part of measures to control invasive weed species. But glyphosate is declared not to be cancer-causing in humans, we'll accept that, but not, even though not all scientific and medical trial studies agree with that conclusion. But we'll agree that if it's used in accordance with strict instructions, it's not carcinogenic in humans. But this is a very human-centric and it's a very limited exception. And it has been proved, however, to have adverse health effects on pets who may be in sprayed areas. And what about the animals and insects that live permanently in these spaces? And recent university studies have indicated that glyphosate adversely affects the gut bacteria pollinating insects, such as bees, to the point that New Zealand is contemplating a ban because Japan won't accept their Manuka honey. I can't comment on the science, but herbicide use linked with a decline in bee population is widely studied and reported upon. Excuse me. Other studies have shown effects on aquatic ecology, such as weed killers leaching into waterways, leading to the decline of frog species in wetlands. So, glyphosate has been presented to us as safe and almost harmless, but it is clearly not. And in conclusion, Sorry,
I thought you were finishing. Sorry, Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I'm certainly finishing. In conclusion, I would like to echo the concerns of one of our long-term volunteers. These people know these areas much, much better than most of us on council do. And so let's lead the way with non-toxic weed treatments, investigate new options if they look promising, but let's stick to steam weeding until we do. And please do not let's rescind and increase this, because otherwise what is this rescission in favour of if it's not to increase the use of glyphosate in our community? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Just before we proceed, I note that the CEO has her hand up. Now, I'm not sure if that's an accident or not.
No, it's not, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, if I could please, a couple of points just made by Councillor Carter, which I think adversely reflect on the town and its governance and performance. One was in relation to not having in place a robust complaints system. We do have a formal complaints handling system, and we're also subject to the oversight of several independent bodies. In the case of formal complaints being lodged with the town, we also have to report on formal complaints through our annual report each year. Also in respect to the controls around the use and application of herbicides, we do have controls in place. Every time our staff go out and apply herbicides, they have to be done in certain conditions. We actually record each application and ensure that it's done in accordance with the instructions. That information is made available in the event there is a complaint, and it's actually been very helpful in providing responses where people have raised concerns that we've had the evidence to support the correct application.
Thank you, Ms. Mads. I was actually at councillors, please.
Can I just respond to that?
Councillor Carter, please.
I just wanted to say I'm sorry.
Step back from the commentary. Ms. Mads, I actually was going to make some statements on that in my rebuttal. So, Councillor Carter, you have, we are in debate, and I would ask councillors to remind you that we're in debate. You have had your debate counter against. We have heard from the CEO. Now, I would like to actually ask if we have any other councillors to debate in favour of the amendment. I do not see any other hands going up. Do we have any councillors to debate against the amendment? Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to recognise that this item is particularly emotive for many people in our community, and I want to show my appreciation for the amount of public engagement and public comments and deputations and other public participation for this item. When I consider this topic, I consider it to be broader than just how it will look as a budget line item, though I do acknowledge that that's a consideration. One of my reasons for running for council was to try and future-proof our decisions for future generations, and to a certain extent for myself as well. When I look at the proposal to return to using chemicals, I see risk. And as this landscape constantly changes and as different information comes to light, you know, different considerations for human health and pet health and environmental health and insect health, the question that keeps coming to mind for me is, what if there are those risks? What if there are those harms? Our future generations will already be burdened with the consequences of choices that were cheaper at the time, but existentially expensive in the future, particularly regarding climate. And I think if there is a possibility that a choice we'll be making will add to that intergenerational debt, then I feel obligated to err on the side of caution. And that's why I am voting against the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wilding. Are there any councillors for the motion, the amended motion? Councillor McWilliam.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I do want to speak more broadly in support of this motion. I do think that it's all very well for the town to take on the lion's share of weed management, and hopefully in the near future, Main Rose will take back some of that responsibility for management of weeds on hard surfaces on the is it Tier 1 roads? But I also see in all of this is that the reason we have all of these weeds is often due to each of us not taking the responsibility we need to take to manage our own gardens. I live near a vacant block at the moment, which is up for property development and had been slashed and now has a crop of probably 2 to 3 foot high weeds, which will be shortly flowering in this sunny weather and then will be watered yet again as the break of season arrives. So I do think that it's worth noting that each of us can take responsibility for managing the weeds that are on our properties. And secondly, that each of us probably could do with information from the council as to when are the times that we should be managing the weeds and exactly how we should be. So pre-flowering, pre-seeds being released, because one of the greatest issues about weeds is that every time they put out a load of seed, each year it is enough for 5 years worth of weeds. So unless we all accept some responsibility for this, it's not going to go away just by us applying steam or glyphosate or any other myriad ways as have been suggested this evening and could well be added to the list. We need to take personal responsibility for our gardens and our remit for weeds management. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McWilliam. So I will now ask, do we have any more councillors to debate for or against the item? So that being said, I will go via each councillor to get your vote. Closing argument. Apologies. I was rather eager to get to the vote there. I think that all of us on council have a real concern for the environment and for our town and wanting to do the best. I see people who work very hard to do the best they can for this town, and staff as well. I congratulate the staff for the efforts that they make to provide us with information and to do their very best at the jobs that they do. So it's a combined effort. And I will congratulate Councillor McWilliam for noting that weed management should be a combined effort. If we're going to tackle this problem, it's not just a council issue. There are weeds growing everywhere in the town. So it may well be that there should be some stronger management of vacant blocks that have a lot of weed growth and the seed bank that goes. But that's not the item that's before us tonight. Tonight we're dealing with road reserves, our hard surfaces, and how we as a council are going to move forward. Now, as a council, I believe that we are very proactive in looking for new technologies and new methods. I believe that the staff are not going to sit on their laurels and just, do some glyphosate. I believe that they will actively pursue new technologies and new methodologies. I do believe from conversations that myself and Councillor Carter have had with the Environmental Officer recently, I do believe that the staff have a program of checks and balances. However, they have indicated that they will increase those checks and balances by creating spot unannounced checks on different areas of the town when works are being undertaken. These are all efforts to improve the way we do our work and the way we manage the town. So we manage weeds, we manage infrastructure. All of our staff have different aspects of the organisation that they deal with. And what I'm asking for is your support of my amended motion, because it provides a way forward. It provides a pathway for the staff to move forward. It does allow the reintroduction of glyphosate in some areas. And I say some areas. It allows the continued use of steam weeding in the majority of the town on the hard surfaces for at least the next 15 months. And in that time, the staff will investigate alternatives, and they have been asked to bring back information to council. Now, I think this is an appropriate way to move forward, and as such, I would ask for your support for this amended motion. Thank you. Now, I will put it to the vote, and I will go around each councillor. Councillor McLennan, are you for or against?
I appreciate your efforts, Councillor Hamilton, but I'm against.
Councillor McWilliam, for or against?
I'm for the motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Polifka.
For, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am against the motion.
Councillor Ames.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I am for the amendment.
Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm against the amendment and the motion.
And as the mover of the motion, clearly I'm for the motion, so the amended motion, so I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors, and thank you all for your debate and your passion, and thank you, staff. With that, we will move on to the next item. Which is item 12.6, review of council policies, environmental sustainability and adaptation to climate change. Ms Davies, I believe this is yours. Did you wish to speak to this?
No, Madam Mayor, I don't have anything further to add. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm happy to move motion.
Sorry, I missed that. Sorry, Councillor, you broke up there, so I missed that.
I just said that I'm happy to move the officer recommendation.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that. Is there anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. Next one is 12.7, proposed CAT amendment, local law 2022. I'm not sure if the officer would like to speak to this. It has had a lot of dialogue in the past. Mr. Gibson.
Through Madam Mayor, nothing more to add.
Okay, and councillors, questions? Councillor Polifka.
It is more a procedural question. Why was this one not passed in block? Is there some reason it has to be dealt with separately, given the nature of it, or something like that? Perhaps Director Gibson, does this require us to explicitly deal with it, or is it something that could have been dealt with en bloc?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd suggest, maybe Ms Kanya would like to confirm, but I'd suggest it was not included in the en bloc section on account of it requiring an absolute majority.
Okay, excellent, thanks.
That's correct.
So if there are no further questions, do we have a mover? I'm happy to move that. Do we have a seconder?
Yeah, happy to do so.
Councillor Polifka. Anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. The next one is 12.8, Audit and Governance Committee meeting held on the 9th of March 2022. Mr White, did you wish to speak to this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Only very briefly, just in relation to the compliance return, this is the only change from the briefing session. Unfortunately, during a week ago, I reported that we were compliant in all areas in relation to the compliance return, but since then there has been an internal review, and it was found that there was, I guess, really an administrative error in that primary or annual returns that were lodged had not been acknowledged as is required under the regs. So we've just amended the compliance return to account for that and included an additional paragraph in the report to council in red for council's attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, councillors? Do we have a mover for the officer recommendation?
Yes, I'd like to move that.
Councillor Plifka, seconded. Councillor McLennan. Anyone against?
Just in respect of that, Madam Mayor, could I just highlight one of the recommendations? I mean, having been on the Audit and Risk Committee, I just wanted to note point 4, which is addressing one of the asset ratios, which was one of the local government ratios, which was deficient. So they were just talking about considering increasing asset renewal expenditure, because that's one of those local government ratios that we'd fallen behind on. So that's just something where council is signalling to Department of the Local Government that is something we take seriously, and we're looking to address that and to make sure that our ratios are compliant.
Mr. White, are you on board with that? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Polifka. Yes, that was proposed as an amendment to the officer recommendation by the committee and adopted by the committee, and subsequently recommended to council tonight, and fully supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder. Is there anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. So we move to 12.13, which is the calendar for April 2022. Unless anyone's got any questions, I'll move straight on to the recommendation. So do I have a mover for 12.13? Councillor McLennan and Councillor Wilding seconded. Do I have anyone against?
Sorry, Councillor Hamilton, it's probably not important, but my hand was not up.
Okay, sorry, that was Councillor McWilliam. Sorry, I just saw CRM. Apologies. So Councillor McWilliam has moved that, and Councillor Wilding, you seconded, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, do we have anyone against? I'll declare that carried unanimously. So we now move on to 13.1, which is a notice of motion by Councillor Polifka. Just pardon me while I turn the page. Councillors, you all have that notice of motion in front of you. May I ask if there's any questions on this before we proceed? I can't see any hands up. So, Councillor Polifka, would you like to read out your notice of motion for the public?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So the notice of motion is as follows. One, council acknowledges the importance of maintaining a town planning environment conducive to encouraging expedited development within the town, so that the town centre master plan and development in the town as a whole may be substantially realised in the near term. The second point being that council requests that prior to presenting any report to council, consider any report to council which considers new or amended planning controls that the CEO seeks input from a peak membership organisation representing the property development industry in Western Australia. That is the motion I'm proposing.
So thank you, Councillor Plifka. Again, I'll ask if there's any questions from councillors on this one. So Councillor Plifka, you're moving your notice of motion. Is there a seconder for this notice of motion? Councillor McLennan. A lot of hands going up there. Okay, so we have Councillor Plifka has moved the notice of motion. We have Councillor McLennan has seconded. Do we have anyone against? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Plifka.
Thank you, Matt.
So announcements of notices of motion for the next meeting. No, didn't get them finished. Move on. Number 15, urgent business. There is none. And with that, we will move on to confidential business. So I will need a mover to go behind closed doors. I have Councillor Wilding, seconder, Councillor McLennan. Anyone against? Okay, I declare that we are moving behind closed doors. Declare that carried unanimously. And if I could have the recording, Miss Kenya, does the recording get turned off at this point? So the recording is saved.
Can I just say, I'm sure the staff are onto this, but the live streaming as well?
That